What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we are here with The Offering. Great to be able to talk with you guys here. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, anytime, man. Anytime. It's so cool to have you here. We got the brand new album coming out very soon, Seeing the Elephant. This album is absolutely kick-ass. For people who haven't heard the full-length album yet, do you feel like the first three singles that you released, Wasps, Flower Children, and Tiny Disappointments, is maybe a good representation of what the entirety of Seeing the Elephant will sound like, or is that just scratching the surface of what's to come?
I would say scratch the surface. I mean, I think we had so many back and forths trying to pick the singles out for this album because every single song is super different. I think it's gonna be difficult because you're both named Alex. This is gonna be super difficult. I'm just gonna call Al. You know, my Al's Al. I feel like Al can elaborate a little bit more on that thematically because there's some songs where I think the concept really just isn't anything like Wasp or Flower Children, and there's some songs that are even more in that direction of those two songs, you know. So
yeah, we definitely went out of our way to try to hit every musical palette that we were all into. I mean, the whole point of making albums is to make music we wanted to hear, and fortunately or unfortunately for us, we listen to a lot of different music, so we kind of wanted to hit on every emotional level with inspiration from as many genres as we could.
Well, and was that like a preconceived vision of not even just what Seeing the Elephant, but what the entirety of the Offering catalog, like your previous album, Home, is supposed to envision? Was this always a preconceived vision, or did it kind of just happen that way as you guys were making more and more music together?
Go ahead, Mitch.
I feel like it's half and half, right? I feel like on one hand, we're one of those bands that before every album we sit down, we're like, what are we doing? What's this whole thing? What are we gonna try to accomplish here? And then I'd like to act like everything that happens is totally planned and methodical, but really it is kind of just throwing stuff at the wall, and then it's a lot of stuff getting trashed, honestly. So you do a ton of stuff. If you're in the Offering, it's like you listen to a ton of kind of half finished demos, and you're just like, does that fit what we talked about? And you just trash the rest. So it's kind of both, honestly.
Mm-hmm. And I heard you reference conceptual elements as well, and the sort of stories and ideas behind it. Does a concept or a lyrical idea maybe also help dictate the direction of the sound as well?
Yeah,
I definitely would. I would agree with that. I think that usually when we're having the same meetings where we're going over the demos and deciding what songs we want to go for, we're also having conversations about what direction we want to write about, and how we can reflect those meanings in the musical tone as we move forward from the demo process.
Mm-hmm. And do you want this album to be open to interpretation, or is there a meaning or a message that you're trying to engage the listener to watch the music itself?
Dude, I think it's so, it might be the only work I've ever written that really doesn't have black or white or gray. I mean, it so clearly has a meaning. I try to not use much metaphor. I try not to use much fancy literary wordplay or fucking whatever. I'm just kind of just saying exactly how I feel. So not really much to interpret.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's fair to say that I do consider The Offering to be a relatively experimental band, kind of going back to what you said, how every song really does play by its own rules on this album, from Tipless to Ghost Mother to With Consent. It just seems like that there is so many different elements into it. Does the instrumentation also have to adjust depending on what the vocal aspects are in a way?
Yeah, I'm always tweaking stuff. I mean, if you think about it, this is actually, usually we do music first, but this is the first album with the song Seeing the Elephant where Alex gave me vocals first. So this is probably our first time where from the very get-go, we're doing, starting with one or the other. I want to say that across all of our music, though, once I kind of hear what Alex is doing vocally, I'm tweaking away. If even if he changes a word up, I might be all right, let's add a sound effect for that somewhere here. That, you know what I mean? So once the base of the song is set, it definitely becomes this give and take kind of thing. But on this album, yeah, with Seeing the Elephant, that song that was really cool because it was like all vocals, and it was like how do we like design this, this scene and setting for just strictly like the whole vocal track like already done basically.
Mhm. And here now, I normally hate asking this question, but I just have to because it seems like the elephant is an animal now that has been like a mascot for a lot of heavy metal albums, as we've seen with the Perfect Circle, as we've seen with Mastodon, as we've seen with a lot of bands. Is the elephant that we're seeing on this album, seeing the elephant, is this? You mentioned that you don't like to go very metaphorical, but like, what is this sort of? Is this like a spirit animal, or is this part of the story in a way?
Actually, so the way that the elephant came to be was the original idea was to have a historical hanging elephant called Mary. That is a story about a town in the South during the turn of the Victorian era, where a elephant killed a spectator at a circus, and then they hung it from a crane. And so ever since we started this band, Nish and I kind of like tried to work out the idea of how we could get a picture of Mary, the hanging elephant, on the album cover. But ultimately, I'm not sure if we couldn't find a high enough res photo, or if Central Media was like, this implies suicide or some type of like, hanging metaphor. So then we ultimately just like went with, can an artist make an elephant for us that looks kind of unique,
Yeah.
To answer further to your question too, yeah, it's apparently a giant conspiracy in the metal industry. We're all trying to force feed you an elephant for the last 2 years.
Well, A Perfect Circle ate the elephant on their last album. You guys are seeing the elephant. So, but after the story you told me, I don't know which one is more
after they
morbid.
Vomited it back out, or maybe the other end, we saw the elephant afterwards. Weird.
Yeah, maybe this is the forgotten sequel to that album. Like, but like I've always wondered. There's a band called Cage the Elephant. There's a Mastodon song called Elephant Man. Like it's just really incredible. Because how many bands have the word black in their title? Black Sabbath.
Oh yeah.
Black Wizard, Black Veil Brides. So many of those. But now the elephant is starting to become like such a common theme. I'm starting to wonder if there is something around that animal that almost makes it as much of a metal icon as the horns are at this point.
We didn't really think about it that much because you're naming things that I'm like, oh yeah, Cage the Elephant is a band. The one that we did get on our radar, like we had in the group chat, was like, I think Satriani had like Elephants of Mars with like a abstract elephant as the cover. And we were just like, dang, did he really beat us to the punch on this one? And then now you're saying it, we're like, yeah, I guess there's a ton of other elephants.
Like the title "Seeing the Elephant" came before the idea of having an elephant on the album cover.
Yeah.
So it was like, all right, well, how can we make this original, or even just like pass it through the weaves of the elephant cliches in metal,
Yeah. And you know what? I'm also, being the journalist, I'm supposed to overthink this stuff for a living and ask so many questions about it. So, I can't tell you how many times where I was like, what's the historical significance of this icon? I was like, dude, it's the word "the." I have no idea what the fuck is. So
okay.
Yeah. But what I think is great too is that the album cover is so vibrant on it, and the music is definitely vibrant, having all these different sources of inspiration, all these different styles for the songwriting process of The Offering, not even just pertaining to this album, but even to Home, your previous album. Like, is it fair to say that maybe trying new things is a little bit easier and there's a little bit more flexibility in that, kind of not, confining yourselves to any labels or setting up too many boundaries for yourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think the worst thing for us is like across the board is whenever someone says you can't do that. It's like, you know what I mean? Like we immediately we're just like, everyone's like, yeah, I can. You know what I mean? Like you will try every avenue to like force this idea to work, and then you scrap it if it really stinks. But I mean, I think our worst moments, but we all look back on like across our catalog, is like, yeah, we were playing it too safe on that. Like, yeah, we didn't really we didn't go all out on that, and that's like the complaint every single time. So I feel like that is absolutely true in our case.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't in that regard. Like, if you stick with a certain sound, you'll be criticized for being repetitive. If you experiment a lot, people will criticize you for being directionless. So I think it really is sort of like a gut instinct that you have to stick with, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Also, like, not everyone is like you, who is like really like, not everyone is stressing over the word "the." You know what I mean? A lot of people are just on the internet and they're just like, they think about her like 5 seconds and they kind of spew their idea out. And so I think for us, especially, this is our first time after that first album where we had like a wide variety of feedback from like all these different avenues, whether it's like a really intricately written journalist blog, or whether it's like a 2 second YouTube comment. Like, Home gave us a lot of that, and so I think for this one it was super important for us to like detach from that and kind of realize that these are just strangers. You know what I mean? Like, we just have to still do what we do that we're comfortable with first, and then think about that.
When it comes to getting that inspiration to write, whether it be musically or lyrically, is it maybe easier to come up with new ideas when you're in the company of each other, or do you prefer to kind of like, isolation being such a great fuel for creativity? Is it maybe easier to come up with ideas when you're more alone in your own element and there's not too many cooks in the kitchen?
That's a great question for an album that we made during a pandemic.
Yeah, yeah.
I would say I'd say it's a little bit of both. Like, we kind of all need our space to really flesh out ideas, because I mean, everyone here definitely is really good at like being on their own and like kind of getting the answer themselves as to whether something's good or not. So that when you do put it up to the table, it's like, this has been, obviously vetted 1,000 times by each person individually. When Alex and I are in the same room, though, for like those final like little production twists on things here and there, like we call it sprinkles, like that is the most fun part of every album.
I think so
That's
too.
when silly stuff comes out, and it's all good, and we like don't really even cut it that often. We're just like, you know what, we were having fun doing, and we're just gonna leave that in there. So
Do
yeah,
idea
I would say we're definitely better together. Yeah.
do ideas have to like come out of the blue lyrically or instrumentally? Like, do they just strike when you least expect it, or is there maybe like a lot of observation and a lot of research, or even like kind of thinking about previous experiences before you sort of like put pen to paper with writing?
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes to the lyric writing, of course, I like, not to sound like a little like a dick here, but like I'm a big fan of like gonzo journalism and method acting, and I would consider myself a pseudo academic, right? So the majority of the things I write about have to be heavily researched. I have to have touched the topic as well. So like, if I'm writing about something, I have to stick my nose in a situation where I can relate or feel empathy. I'm definitely not a person who's just going to sit down and write without any prior experiences.
Hmm. Well, do you find it like the longer you're working on something, though, whether you have to read about something more, or sit more alone with your guitar or your instrumentation or whatever, do you find it like the longer you're working on something, the harder it is to sort of like maintain that creative spark that initially started that idea?
No, so usually what happens is I get an idea lyrically for a song. Nish sends me something that I like, and then I'm like, all right, Nish, I'm gonna write a song about this topic. And then before I even start writing lyrics, I spend weeks recording, or weeks doing research, sticking my nose, doing like for the album, like I would go to evangelical church congregations and protests, and just get what I need. So by the time I'm writing, I have so much paperwork. I have so much notes and words and key phrases that I'm just gonna spew and make it fit.
And I'd imagine too, there's a lot of stuff that comes internally as well, right? Like, it's not just observation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, if I allow myself to like go into like childhood trauma or whatever to make a personal song, for sure. But on this album, it felt like I was externally, I was taking my inspiration externally, kind of just letting the collective anger of the entire universe just seep into my house.
Yeah, and that led me, actually, this is kind of like a bit of a, I don't want to say a debate or whatever, but like, people always say, oh, art is an escapism, music is an escapism. But whether you are using internal sources of inspiration from your own experiences or external sources, looking out into the world, is that really escaping anything? Because it's still your experiences of the world.
And dude, part of this project was to make music that wasn't escapism. So a lot of the bands that we're peers with or we watch all the time talk about dragons and vampires and keywords and leather and all this fucking bullshit that means nothing. And so the idea was to participate in the tradition of doing some type of like cultural or political commentary and try to rise to the same lyrical prowess as like bands like System of a Down or Rage Against the Machine, or bands that actually for us influenced us more than just musically. I mean, like, how much has System of a Down's lyrical content affected us at the voting booth now that we're getting close to 30?
Well, I don't know, because the last time they put out an album, I was 11, so I couldn't vote yet. So,
Oh yeah, okay, no, yeah, but even so, like, even if you're singing about those types of things, and then you start listening to the music at 11, and then it continues with you until you're 15, and then you're still listening to System of a Down, Rage Against the Machine at 18, and then like, how did their lyrics affect those decisions later?
yeah, when I go to
that's the big thing, Corona.
I'm so gonna go to the polls at the midterm elections, being like, everybody's going to the party, have a real good time. Cause a little upheaval. But
I mean, like the low key jab, like, yeah, why? Well, let's look back at the last System of a Down album. Oh, wait, that was 15 years ago. My goodness.
It is true. It is true.
I'm notorious. But I'm notorious for making people feel very old. By the way, that's kind of like my shtick in this whole thing.
All right. Well, we got Damien who's still continuing, and Serge puts out songs once in a while.
Yeah.
Kinda.
Yeah. Everybody has their own experiences. There's a lot of stuff that Rage Against the Machine sings about that maybe I couldn't have related to as a child. When you're 5 years old, I don't know nothing about politics. When I was, a little boy, all I cared about was Nickelodeon and Legend of Zelda. But I liked the music at the time, so I would just sing along and get onto it. I think it has to be sonically intriguing before any message really is going to be leading people in. I wouldn't, Crack the Sky, which I think is one of the greatest concept albums of all time. I wouldn't have cared if that was about Brondale or Sister, or if that was about Rasputin's The Russian Revolution historical references, if, the intro to Oblivion didn't pull me into that. So I think it kind of has to be a sonically intriguing aspect before the conceptual elements sort of pull you in. But everybody is their own person and interprets art differently, right?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Crack the Sky. I mean, you want to talk about a spontaneously put together musical experience and then slapping a huge concept on it. I remember watching those reading about when they were making that one. That one still sticks with me.
Yeah.
I think that's how we kind of approach it too, where it's like, just let your experience kind of dictate where it's supposed to go. And that is like this throw it against the wall, let's see what sticks kind of thing. Cause like, you can't really, even for us, like we can't separate our personal experiences from what comes out when we start creating stuff, because we're just reflecting that back into whatever we're coming up with. It's very spontaneous.
I mean, it still would be significantly easier to write within the archetypal language of heavy metal. I mean, like if we were just to sing about gung ho, ale drinking dragons and vampires, I'm sure we'd even sell more records.
Yeah. Hey, you never know. Hey, sex sells and dragons sell. So that's the beauty of heavy metal. It all sells. Sex, Satan, and dragons.
Yeah, that's true.
They changed three letters and drugs and made it dragons, and that was the metal scene.
Fucking vampire metal.
Yeah.
Hey, it exists, man. When it comes to like the whole songwriting process, though, and this is also kind of like a new question I want to ask, because again, with the Offerings music being so experimental and whatnot, I wanted to ask this, where like, do you think it's better if everybody in the band is on the same page when writing the music, whether it would be, once again, conceptually or musically, or do you think if everybody is kind of like in their own headspace or within their own world, that could actually help the songwriting process a little bit more?
Ooh. I want to say as long as it's inspired, whatever it is, even if you're not on the same page and you're, I don't know, like, I think there's something to be said about that kind of mind meld where you put everyone together and put a few finishing touches on things. And, for us, most of it, the buck kind of really does stop between me and Alex. So it's like, it really, if there's something between me and Alex that's, we're disagreeing on a part or whatever, like that's going to be the biggest roadblock, I would say. Usually with Spencer and Steve, their responsibility is to kind of add that third person perspective to say, yo, you guys have been in the booth for way too long. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of like their responsibility to basically kind of add that. Because sometimes when you're in a dark room for 2 months, you haven't seen the sunlight. Like you forget what a sunrise is supposed to look like. If you're just trying to paint that makes no sense, right? So having that perspective is important. Like them being elsewhere and kind of bringing that in is good. For me and Alex, I would say it's probably the opposite. I feel like we kind of have to go down those rabbit holes. Kind of have to, even if we're not on the same page, like we have to still be really confident in what we're doing. And that comes from that joint feedback of, hey, you're on the right track, or no, I think we got to correct course a little bit and focus up a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I don't know, Al, do you have anything to say about that? I feel like
no, dude, that makes total sense to me.
Yeah. Awesome. And here's another question that kind of circling back to the meaning in a way, because I've always said that art is life, and when you bring it into the world, it grows and develops. Sometimes it could eventually die. But do you feel like that maybe the meaning of the music could evolve over time as you evolve as an artist, or would you prefer if every album that The Offering makes is more or less a snapshot of who you guys are at that particular time?
I think the latter.
Yeah.
The idea for us, at least, I'm going to speak for myself here for a quick second, but I always assume that music is a snapshot of who we are and how we think at the time in which we write the music. Right. So as of now, this is how we're feeling on the next album. We haven't even talked about the next album a little bit, but not too much. Who knows if it probably will only reflect a tiny bit of this album. Just because we're getting older and we're thinking about different things, we're in different stages of our lives, we got to grow too.
Yeah, and I've always wondered about that too. Tool released their last album, and it was music written over a course of 13 years. And nobody is the same person in a year as they were previously. So it's how do you make that kind of sound consistent, or a snapshot of who you guys were? Unless maybe you wrote one song a year, and for 13 years.
I mean, we definitely can ideas for that reason too. We definitely go back and we're things that we're really stoked on. We even went back to some of the B-sides from the last album, where things that just we didn't even have time to approach and finish. And we're that just sounds like 2018, throw in the trash. You know what I mean? There's no absence of ideas. I think that's fake. I think you can always kind of come up with stuff. So sometimes, I think earlier when we were a band, we would have this attachment to hold on to. Hey, that was a good idea. We don't know if that one's going to come around again. But it's if you feel like that snapshot isn't relevant anymore, just throw it away. It's fine. Let's move on to the next thing and see where it goes from there. You even said the word snapshot. I was thinking the word snapshot. So I mean, that's kind of I think how much I agree with you on that one.
And here comes the final question of the interview. I want you both to answer because it's the most difficult one. How do you know when you are finished with a song?
I can't sing anymore.
when you're 2 weeks overdue the deadline, and the label is asking to hear it back, and our mix engineer is saying he's got only a few more days to work on it. That's when you know you're finished with the song.
Yeah, when I can't sing anymore. Yeah, blow out my throat for each song, so it might as well it's
good right, to have limits. It's good to have limits. I think people are always it's only I know when it's finished. No, you could definitely, what's that rule? There's that rule where you'll fill up time and space if you have the opportunity to, but if the deadline is shorter, you'll adjust to make it work. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You'll save all of your work to make it. Yeah, I think that's super important, especially in music and dealing with creative stuff, because it's part of that process. I feel mentally, to just keep running on and on and on and on and on until you're it's basically daydreaming after a certain point. But having someone crack the whip, having your voice getting blown out, that's it. Enough to call it a day, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because some people would argue that a deadline would add pressure, and then that pressure would almost hinder the songwriting process. But every artist I've interviewed, they have said they work the best under pressure. Deadlines always help. It's everything that you would think is the opposite is working in their favor.
Yeah. I mean, you're cranky though. You're mad. You're
which it's fucking heavy metal, man.
Yeah, you're why I need more time. You know what I mean? That's always That's always the complaint. But then, in hindsight, I think we're like, okay, we're done. Good. Like,
Yeah, and not to mention, there's so much prep before we decide to record, anyways, that we usually can hear it before it's over.
yeah.
Okay, so you could avoid any pitfall once you are in the like mixing process and everything like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
we're
that's all him, dude.
Yeah, we're so hands-on though. I mean, we literally like, even in our the last mixing day, the last mixing session, like we're doing it over Zoom to like double check things, and I'm still adding stuff. I'm like, here, let me send you this to fix that section there because it doesn't pop. You know what I mean? Like, you're just constantly throwing stuff at it, and then like when it's done, I think that's why we can look back and say we did whatever we could.
I think I even think I had a panic moment where I sent you a chorus that another version of a chorus like weeks after, and you were like, no, we're not using this.
Yeah,
Remember?
I was like, yo, it's good. Like,
yeah,
dude, that's why you need deadlines. That's why you need a deadline.
Yeah.
I'm waiting to see that there's one band that has a career where they just make one song, and then every album they make is just different versions of that same song.
I mean, we already have. I mean, with the advent of streaming, like you've got Lizzo going back and redubbing like lyrics to like fix things. You know what I mean? Like you got Kanye like fixing songs post albums.
Kanye's getting canceled.
Yeah, I'm just saying. It's just like we live in a world where you can really do that. So it'll be interesting. I feel like the next generation isn't really growing up with albums. They just kind of have this like, oh yeah, a song can just be made and slapped on whenever they feel like it. So I feel like that's going to dictate a different direction in about 20 years.
Yeah, my generation grew up with iTunes. Back in the day, if you wanted the bonus track, you had to buy the whole album. I remember setting my alarm for 11:59 to be the first one to buy those MP3s. Kids these days would never know the struggle, right?
Yeah,
but kids these days, but artists are not making albums, so why would anyone expect to buy an album that's not made to be listened to start to finish?
Yeah, absolutely. Which is how I looked at Seeing the Elephant. It's like I don't consider this album to be shuffle friendly, which I mean it as a compliment. You need to start with Wasp and end up with Ether Weeps. So like I feel like this is an album that's meant to like once you start it, there's no turning back. And I think it has that hypnotic aspect behind it, where the second you hear a song, you just want all of it. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. We're still dinosaurs. We still want front to back listening experiences for sure.
Yeah.
Well, everybody wants to see a real live dinosaur, right? That's all the reason to see The Offering.
Well, I watched that last Rick and Morty episode. I'm not really sure if I want to be a dinosaur, so.
Yeah. You never know. You never know. The first metal band to actually become dinosaurs is the best metal band.
Oh wait, there already is one, Heavy Saurus. This is not a plug. This is a real thing.
Oh
Check
yeah.
Oh, Heavy Saurus. It's like a kids metal band from one of the Scandinavian countries.
Of course,
it's like all these famous singers to dress up as mascots
and guitar players, man. Like there are some phenomenal guitar players that do solos for them.
Yeah. The fact that
Heavy Saurus, check it out.
Yeah, it's getting kids into metal early and young. It's such a cool idea.
That's never a bad thing, and the fact that it's from Scandinavia doesn't surprise me one bit. So before we go, I want to thank you guys so much for your time and really for such an awesome conversation to start the week off with. Happy Monday. Is there just anything else with The Offering that you would like to plug for the release of Seeing the Elephant in terms of shows coming up or anything else going on?
Yeah, we've got on the day of Seeing the Elephant getting dropped, we're gonna release a new music video, and that's gonna be pretty fun. We've got some fun cross collaborations coming up too in the future on the internet, just purely some YouTubers and stuff like that. As far as shows go, those are still in the oven.
Book us.
Yeah, there you go. You can do that too.
Book us.
But yeah, no, it's a lot of cool creative stuff coming up. With what we're doing for the next year, so it'll be cool.
Looking forward to hearing it. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We are here with The Offering, Seeing the Elephant, out on Century Media this November. Be sure to pick it up. We will see you next time on Heavy New York.